Hello there, Midnight Pasta here, and with great pleasure, I present to you Part 10, the grand finale of Brian Martinez's The Body Farm. They didn't bury their treasure here, they buried their dead. I was awoken by a gunshot. The rough sounds of scuffles in the dark reverberated in my skull. It took a long time, too long, to draw enough energy to open my eyes, and twice as long to sit up. But finally, my feet dangled from the slab. The contraption around my chest glowed faint red at its center and grew brighter each time I moved. My body was difficult to control. The skin felt twisted over bones, like I'd slept in a suit one size too small. The first time I stood up, I fell down, hit the stone floor hard, but I stood up, steadied myself on an instrument table, and eventually took my first step, followed by another, and then another. The stone was cold and damp under naked feet. The cave was lit up by lanterns and the excited readouts of machines, all those computers cooling down from their purposes. However long I thought it had taken to open my eyes, my perception of time had been wrong. It seemed I was alone inside the cave. The fight had moved elsewhere. Halfway across the cave, I found my sister. She lay in a ditch of wet rock, like a lost doll. I fell on her and wiped the foam from her mouth to check her breathing. It was faint, the same for the pulse in her neck. There was a needle mark where a droplet of blood had beaded up. Before I could try to resuscitate her, her eyes fluttered open and she smiled up at me. "Who did this to you?" My voice, it felt so strange, coming out of my throat. "Your eyes." She was raspy, strained. It was as difficult to ask her to talk as it was for me to watch her try. "Who was it?" "Doc." The word cut out as she winced in pain. Whatever he had used on her was tearing her insides apart. I told her I could get her help, but she shook her head. "Too far. Won't make it. Just promise." "Of course I will." She smiled again. "It's so nice to see your eyes." Suddenly, her smile twisted, and she began spasming underneath me. Her body bounced violently up and down, arms and legs slapping hard rock. I tried my best to hold her still, keep her from hurting herself. My body weight pressed down on her. But soon, the spasm stopped. Her eyes lost focus, and she exhaled one final, small breath. Right there, in my hands, my sister died. I allowed myself a moment before my thoughts turned to the good doctor, the man who had promised to give me my life back and ended up taking it from me. As I pictured his face, I became aware of the cave around me growing brighter, the body of another guard now visible, the ocean water where it entered the cave, all of it cast in blood red. The machine on my chest, it fed my anger. The hotter I burned, the hotter it did, until the cave was like the head of a struck match. As fast as my remembering limbs could take me, I climbed the ladder and exited the cave, emerging into the dark woods, which had been my home for too long. Before I left, I shut the door behind me and made sure it was properly concealed by the plants and ivy and other things that grew there. Like a searing flame, I crossed the island. The old trees lit up in my presence. I ignored everything except my destination. Even as I came alive with fresh senses, I thought of one thing only, one man. Like the coward he was, I knew I would find him near the dock trying to escape the consequences he deserved. Not 20 yards from the building near the dock, I heard his wretched voice. I didn't say 20 minutes, I said 30. Through the trees I could see him, standing in the clearing, arguing with a man on the phone. You can justify it however you want, but if your brother isn't pulling up to this dock in 30 minutes, it will be your head. Do you understand me? He had been stabbed. The back of his coat slick with blood. I hoped it was my sister who'd done the deed, but I had the faint memory of it in the back of my mind, as if I'd done it myself. I waited for him to hang up the phone before I stepped out of the trees. The sound of my foot breaking a twig caught his attention, and his hand tensed around his gun. He relaxed when he saw it was me, as if I didn't pose a threat. Get back to the lab, he ordered, like I was his dog. I saw what you did to her. The doctor's face tensed up as he reevaluated my presence. It wasn't avoidable, he concluded. Now help me with him so we can finish this. He looked over to the small guard building, through the door, which seemed to be blocked from the inside. There. He sees me, the doctor said. Now is the time. If I help you with him, you help me with her. He looked back at me. You're mad. Yes, I am. I walked slowly toward the doctor, and for the first time since I met him, fear crossed his eyes. I told you it was unavoidable. Even if I wanted to, there isn't enough time to bring her back. As he babbled and fumbled over his words, I took hold of the metal contraption wrapped around my chest and began to pull it from my skin. I ignored the pain of the needles and wires ripping free. Now, hold on! The body doesn't give up on the old spirit so easily. You're only half in this world. I tore the remainder of the machine off my body and advanced on him, wielding it above my head as a weapon. He stepped back and tripped over a large root, falling on his back. Help me, I said. Of course, he replied. He raised his gun and fired. The bullet screamed past my ear. The rage exploded in my chest as I began to bludgeon him with his own device. There's still work to be done, he screamed, firing again. But I could barely hear him, my ears gone deaf. Not wanting to break the contraption, I threw it aside and choked him with my hands. And even as the bulb dimmed, all was red in the night. With my legs burning, I left him there and began working on the office door, beating against it with my hands and body. A shout came from inside the small building. I beat on it harder until the wood cracked, and after a minute, I pushed it the rest of the way open. A stitched-together man stood frantically typing at the computer. He wore guard's clothes and the parts of a dozen different corpses. A suit which had recently belonged to me. The patchwork man looked at me, at my face, and the look of familiarity filled his eyes, followed by horror. "What?" he exclaimed. He looked down at his hands, turned them over to see the black thread holding them together. "No, you can't." Using his disorientation against him, I attacked the patchwork man. We fought brutally, each of us laying claim over the same earthly body, and at times I saw the struggle from his eyes, and at times I could feel him seeing it through mine, but his weak, assembled body was no match for mine. He managed to bruise and cut my new face, but in the end, I was the one left standing. As his mismatched eyes grayed over, I read the screen to see what he'd been so passionately writing. "Listen, I'm writing this because I have no phone and no one to email. My father is dead, and my mother might as well be. I have no friends, and I have no one to help me. Don't come out here. I'll update tomorrow. I'll be okay. I'll think of something. God, just don't come out here." Before I sign off, I have something to confess. I wasn't just hired to be a guard. That was how it started, but then it became something more. These men approached me and said the doctor was conducting secret studies on the island. They said he'd discovered the soul. The man with the birthmark, he told me the doctor made a breakthrough in something called spirit retrieval, that they wanted me to spy on him, to get it for themselves. Or they'd tell people what I did, that I was responsible for my father's death. I didn't believe it at first, but now I think the island is some kind of focal point, stealing the body parts. That's just phase 1. Once they get the spirit into the body, it can be transferred into someone whole, someone alive. That red glow out there, whatever killed the doctor, I think it's the brother, and I think I know what he wants. If I make it off this island, that is, if my body makes it to shore, it might not be just me inside of it. Whatever you do, don't trust me. With one bloody finger, I held down the backspace key until I was satisfied, then hit send. I stripped the patchwork man of his uniform, put it on myself, and dragged his body into the woods to join the others. Let the sniveling man deal with it, the men who sniffed and pried and stole for themselves, like so many maggots I'd come to know. As I stood at the end of the dock to wait for the boat, the sting of the wind on my damaged body, I could feel the guard inside, fighting me. The patchwork man, struggling to take his life back. He didn't understand the futility of his fight, for the simple reason that I wanted it more. His life, his vessel, and would do more to keep it. And it was that simple. I would pull his strings until it was time to cut them. You won't hear from me after today. You will never see me again. I will not tell you where I am or where I'm going. This is my final transmission. One day, I'll come back for her.